I call him Bob, and what happened next terrified me. The hum of the refrigerator was my best friend. Ironic, considering it was probably older than me. But it was reliable, a constant in the otherwise silent symphony of my apartment. I'd been laid off from the studio 3 months ago, another casualty of restructuring. Now, my days consisted of microwaved meals, endless scrolling, and a growing sense of dread that clung to me like cheap cologne. To keep myself from completely dissolving into the couch, I started a project. An ambient sound journal, I called it. I'd always been fascinated by the hidden soundscapes of the everyday. The creak of the building settling, the distant siren, the almost imperceptible whoosh of air conditioning. Armed with my trusty Zoom recorder and a pair of high-sensitivity mics, I began capturing the sonic landscape of my life. The first few recordings were mundane. The hiss of my ancient radiator, the rhythmic tapping of Mrs. Francor, Henderson's cane in the hallway, the muffled conversations from the street below. I meticulously cataloged and edited them, finding a strange solace in the process. Then it happened. I was recording the ambience of my living room late one night, the window slightly open to capture the city's distant murmur. Playback was routine. The hum of the computer, the almost silent rotation of the fan, the chirping of crickets bleeding in from outside. But then, buried beneath the surface, a sound that didn't belong. It was low, distorted, almost guttural, like someone trying to speak through a mouthful of cotton. I isolated the frequency, boosted the gain. The sound became clearer, but no less unsettling. It sounded like a voice. Liam. Goosebumps prickled my arms. I checked my equipment, ran diagnostics. Nothing. No explanation for the anomaly. I re-recorded the same scene. Clean. Nothing there. I almost convinced myself it was a fluke, a random electronic interference. But the seed of doubt had been planted. I archived the recording, labeling it Living Room Ambient 712 Anomaly. I started calling the anomaly Bob, because it sounded so ordinary. Bob showed up again a few days later, in a recording of the alleyway behind my building. This time, the voice was slightly louder, slightly clearer. My heart hammered against my ribs. I replayed the recording a dozen times, each time the word watching chilling me to the bone. I tried to rationalize it. A neighbor talking in their sleep? A radio transmission bleeding through? But the voice, it felt, directed. I started meticulously reviewing all my previous recordings. Bob was there, lurking in the background of almost everyone. Faint, distorted whispers that I had previously dismissed as background noise. Now, magnified and isolated, they formed a horrifying chorus. Soon, closer. Yours. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. I stayed up late, hunched over my computer, poring over waveforms and frequency analysis. I became obsessed with finding an explanation, a pattern, anything that could make sense of Bob. Sarah, my older sister, called, sensing my distress.
Liam, you sound terrible. Are you eating anything besides ramen?
I tried to downplay it. Just busy, Sarah, working on the sound project. That's good, honey. Keeps you occupied. But don't forget to come up for air. You haven't left your apartment in days, have you? I'm fine, I lied. Really? Gotta go. Big deadline. I hung up, the guilt gnawing at me. Sarah was a nurse, practical and grounded. She wouldn't understand. She'd probably suggest I up my dosage of anxiety meds. But the anxiety was justified. Bob was escalating. One afternoon, while recording the sounds of my kitchen, Bob's voice became undeniably clear. Liam, are you listening? I froze, my blood turning to ice. I wasn't even playing back the recording. Bob was speaking in real time. I ripped off my headphones, frantically scanning the room. Empty. Just the hum of the refrigerator, now a menacing drone. I started seeing things. Shadows flickering in the periphery of my vision, movements out of the corner of my eye. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, convinced someone was standing over me, only to find an empty room. Sleep paralysis gripped me almost nightly, leaving me paralyzed with terror, as shadowy figures leered from the darkness. I knew I needed help. Sarah, after hearing my increasingly erratic phone calls, practically dragged me to a therapist. Dr. Albright was a kind-faced woman with a calming voice. but I couldn't bring myself to tell her the whole truth. "I've been feeling anxious," I stammered. "Having trouble sleeping, maybe a bit paranoid." Dr. Albright nodded sympathetically. "The layoff can be incredibly stressful, Liam. It's understandable to feel overwhelmed. Tell me more about these feelings of paranoia." I hesitated. "It's like I'm being watched, like there's something present." I left out the part about the voice, the recordings, Bob. I was afraid she'd think I was completely insane. She suggested cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness exercises, and, of course, adjusting my medication. I went through the motions, attending the sessions, taking the pills, but nothing helped. Bob was still there, a constant, insidious presence. Desperate, I turned to the internet. I found a forum dedicated to unexplained audio phenomena. I created an anonymous account and cautiously posted about my experiences, omitting specific details about my location and identity. The responses were mixed. Some were supportive, offering theories about infrasound, EVP, electronic voice phenomena, and even interdimensional entities. Others dismissed me as a troll, a hoaxer, or simply mentally ill. One user, with the cryptic handle Whisperer, sent me a private message. "I know about Bob," the message read. My heart leaped into my throat. "Who are you? How do you know?" I typed back frantically. "Bob is not to be trifled with," Whisperer replied. "He is, more than he seems. Be careful, Liam. He's already inside." I pressed Whisperer for more information, but they remained cryptic, offering only vague warnings and cryptic pronouncements. They hinted at rituals and protections, but refused to elaborate. The feeling of being watched intensified. I started taping over the camera on my laptop, covering the peephole in my door. I barricaded my windows with blankets and furniture. My apartment became a fortress of paranoia. Then Mrs. Henderson cornered me in the hallway. "Liam, dear," she said, her voice raspy with age, "I couldn't help but notice some unusual noises coming from your apartment lately." My stomach clenched. "Noises? What kind of noises?" "Well," she leaned in conspiratorially, "it sounds like talking. Late at night, sometimes shouting." "Are you having guests over, dear?" "No, Mrs. Henderson," I said, my voice trembling. "I live alone." She narrowed her eyes. "That's funny, because I definitely hear someone talking, even when I know you're the only one home." I mumbled an excuse and hurried back to my apartment, my mind reeling. Mrs. Henderson heard Bob. That meant it wasn't just in my head. Things escalated quickly after that. Objects in my apartment would move on their own. Doors would creak open and slam shut. I'd hear whispers when my equipment was off, just barely audible, like someone breathing down my neck. One night, I woke up to find my entire collection of vinyl records scattered across the floor, their covers torn and scratched. Bob's voice, amplified and distorted, echoed in my head. "You can't hide, Liam," I snapped. I grabbed my Zoom recorder, my microphones, my computer, everything connected to the project. I smashed them against the wall, stomped on them until they were unrecognizable piles of plastic and metal. I screamed until my voice was hoarse, begging Bob to leave me alone. Sarah found me the next morning, huddled in the corner of my living room, surrounded by the wreckage of my audio equipment. She called the police. Detective Reynolds arrived, a weary-looking man with tired eyes. He listened to my story with a mixture of skepticism and concern. He examined the damage, took notes, asked questions. "Mr. Walker," he said finally, "I understand you're going through a difficult time, but there's no evidence of forced entry. It appears you caused this damage yourself." "But the voice," I cried. "You have to believe me. It's real." Reynolds sighed. "We'll take your statement, Mr. Walker, but I suggest you seek professional help." Sarah pleaded with Reynolds to take me seriously. She pointed out the strange occurrences, the neighbor's testimony, my deteriorating mental state. Reynolds, despite his initial skepticism, agreed to investigate further. He brought in a forensic team to analyze the apartment, looking for any signs of paranormal activity. They found nothing conclusive, but they did discover unusual electromagnetic anomalies and unexplained cold spots. Then, Reynolds had an idea. He convinced me to try and record again, using a police-issued audio recorder. I hesitated, terrified. But I knew I had to prove to him, and to myself, that Bob was real. We set up the recorder in my living room. The silence was deafening. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and spoke. "Bob," I said, my voice trembling. "Are you there?" The recorder remained silent. Reynolds frowned, about to shut it off, when a voice, not from the recorder, but from the room, answered. "Yes, Liam, I'm here." Reynolds visibly jumped, his eyes wide with disbelief. He looked around the room, searching for the source of the voice. It was low, distorted, but undeniably present. "Who's there?" Reynolds demanded, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. The voice chuckled. "I'm everywhere, detective, and nowhere." Reynolds grabbed the recorder, his face pale. "We're leaving, Mr. Walker." Back at the police station, Reynolds played the recording for his colleagues. They were equally stunned. No one could explain the voice. Reynolds, now a believer, delved deeper into the case. He researched the history of the building, interviewed former tenants, and consulted with paranormal experts. He found nothing concrete, but he uncovered a disturbing pattern of unexplained deaths and disappearances connected to the apartment building. Then, Whisperer contacted me again. "The ritual," the message read. "It's the only way to stop him. But be warned, Liam. It's dangerous. It could unleash something far worse." I didn't care. I was desperate. I followed Whisperer's instructions, gathering the necessary materials: candles, herbs, salt, and a personal item belonging to me: my old studio headphones. The ritual was terrifying. I chanted the incantations Whisperer provided, my voice hoarse and trembling. The apartment grew cold, the air thick with static electricity. Shadows danced on the walls, twisting into grotesque shapes. Bob's voice, louder than ever, filled my head with taunts and threats. At the climax of the ritual, I burned the headphones, releasing a plume of acrid smoke. The room went silent. Bob was gone. The recordings were silent. The shadows disappeared. The strange occurrences ceased. I was left exhausted, traumatized, and utterly alone. Sarah was relieved, but skeptical. Dr. Albright, cautiously optimistic, but still concerned. Reynolds, haunted by what he had witnessed, continued to investigate the building, but found nothing more. Months passed. I started rebuilding my life, slowly. I got a part-time job at a coffee shop, forcing myself to interact with people. I started sleeping through the night, without nightmares, but the silence was unsettling. I missed the hum of my equipment, the comforting drone of the city. I even missed Bob in a twisted way. He had become a part of me, a dark passenger in my mind. One day, while making a recording of the coffee shop ambience, I noticed something strange, a faint, persistent static in the background, barely audible. It was there even when my equipment was off. I isolated the frequency, boosted the gain. The static intensified, resolving into a low, distorted whisper. I froze, my blood turning to ice. I knew that voice. Bob was back. Or had he ever really left? Maybe he wasn't an external entity, but a manifestation of my own inner demons, given form through my paranoia and amplified by my technology. Maybe I hadn't banished him, but simply internalized him, becoming a vessel for something unknown. I continued recording, the static growing louder with each passing day. I started hearing new voices, deeper, more commanding. They claimed to be grateful for my help, stating that Bob was merely a stepping stone. One day, as I was recording the sounds of the city, the new voice gave me instructions. "Go to the alleyway behind your building, Liam. There's something waiting for you." I hesitated, terrified, but I knew I had to obey. I walked to the alleyway, the recorder in my hand. The air was cold, the shadows long and menacing. As I turned the corner, I saw it, a figure standing in the darkness, its features obscured by the shadows. It raised its hand, beckoning me forward, and I smiled.